with chicken wings. I think today we're just gonna do a little bit of story time as I bring you
spooky tales of wild encounters with humans.
So as we go through life, we all rack up these stories of crazy encounters with people and whatnot, some more memorable than others. And I want to do is just tell a few of my favorites that never would have happened to me if I had never started photography. Let's get right to it. So my first story of a memorable encounter with a person regarding photography goes back to June 2013 when I had one of my big cameras like this out, trying to shoot the beginning of a foot race, like a 5K or something. So normally, if you go out with a big view camera like such, it's pretty common to people, they don't see this kind of stuff very often, so getting stopped and having strangers talk to you, pretty routine. It's generally the same song and dance every time, like, oh, can you even get film for that? Like, of course! You think I'm out here just doing performance art for you? And then the second question is like, oh, do you develop it yourself? And this eventually leads to the third and final question that gets asked every time of, oh, I just love black and white photos. Which is funny because I haven't shot black and white in one of these in like probably a decade. But most of these encounters are pretty harmless. It's just curious people interested in what you're doing, and in a lot of scenes that you shoot with a camera like this, it's a bit slower and you actually have time to actually talk to these people, answer their questions, you know. Sometimes make a new fan, or one encounter I had where someone came and started talking to me is how I met Richard Colburn, who ended up being like a photographer whose work I ended up really admiring once I got into looking at it later when I got home. Link to his site here. But this one time in June 2013 was different. So to start off, when it's time to focus a camera like this, it's typically done under a dark cloth where you are completely oblivious to the outside world. So as I'm under the dark cloth, working on composing and focusing, doing everything I need to do for this scene, which is gonna start really soon, so I have to work fast, I start hearing a muffled voice outside. And like, sure, there are a lot of people around because this is a public event with a lot of spectators, but after a while, I just realized this voice was directed right at me, and was like, oh no, someone's trying to talk to me, and this is one time I don't want to communicate with people because I gotta shoot this photograph real soon. So I eventually pull out of the dark cloth, and there's this guy just going off, and he's telling me about how he has two cameras just like this. And he was telling me about how they're so great for taking grainy black and white photos, which makes no sense, because this is not a camera you use if you want grainy black and white photos. If you want grainy, you need a little negative, not a big ass 8x10" negative that makes grain irrelevant. But he's telling me about, this makes great photos, and then color's too much of a hassle because you have to cut your film down, which, again, I did not have to cut any film down to fit in this camera, so I don't know what this guy's talking about, but I'm obviously trying to work fast, and I don't like to be rude to people who are talking to me, but this is one of those situations where I'm like, can you tell that I'm more focused on the composition right now, and this guy has no social cues and just keeps yapping, to eventually, the part that really made this, the clincher that made this super memorable was that on the spot, he asked me if he could buy my camera off me. And to this day, I wonder if I would have just thrown some ridiculous figure at him, like $5,000, if he'd have just taken it right then. I could have walked away and bought an even better camera than what I was using at the time. One of life's little regrets. But then in the end, like, the worst part is that the guy kept talking the whole time I'm trying to take this picture, and like when it came time to click the shutter, like I was so frazzled, like I kicked the tripod or something, causing the camera to shake, and it ultimately ruined the exposure. So moral of the story, try to have a little sense of what you're doing if you're approaching someone who's out photographing. Like, I will talk to people if I'm not in a hurry. I understand it's a neat contraption they'll see every day, and it's a great point to like hand someone a business card and be like, come look at my work. If you're obviously interested in this camera now, see the work, and you know, that's how you build a little fan base. But this one guy, no social cues, Let's move on. Let's move on. So the glory of social media is that I have all these incidents typed out when they actually happen, so they're like date stamped, and with very specific details I probably would have forgotten over the years if I hadn't written them down. But anyways, story number 2! This one goes back to June 2011. In June 2011, I had an exhibition on display for a series I did called Dark Winter Nights, which, if you have the puzzle-solving capacity in your brain to decrypt my very cryptic titling, it was a bunch of photos that were taken at night in the winter. The studio gallery didn't keep very broad hours for opening or anything, so for the month of June, every weekend I'd go and open up for a few hours so if anyone walking by walks in, they could see my exhibition. Now, one of those weekends, someone did step in to look at my exhibition. This dude, like, I didn't get a good feel from him. He's like the character in the show they introduce, and like they kind of make him be a little bit charming, but you can kind of tell he's kind of a turd. And then like halfway through the season, he stabs the main character in the back and kills him. But one of those types of personalities. You know, he's walking around, kind of looking at the photos. He's like, "Yeah, these your photos?" I'm like, "Yeah, sweet." He walks over, just immediately goes in to tell me about how he like just drove up from Chicago or somewhere with a bunch of paintings in his family and sold them to the local museum for $80,000, and just like bragging it up, being real like, didn't like his vibe. But I entertained him and just keep talking, whatever. And eventually, this is what makes this story memorable. Eventually, he's like, "You want some advice?" And I'm like, "Okay, this guy's selling $80,000 worth of art to museums. He's probably got some useful advice for me," one would think. So I'm like, "Sure." And the guy kind of looks around, makes sure no one's listening in this completely empty building that's just the two of us, and leans in real close and says to me 2 words: "Graffiti graveyard." Okay, so there's some backstory here to understand this. If you're a local watcher of my content, you understood why that's ridiculous. But for everybody else in the world, here's the thing. Graffiti Graveyard is no goddamn secret where I come from. It's a place where I-35 makes like a ramp above like some pillars to do some bridge interchange stuff, and underneath it, like over the years, people have just graffitied the hell out of it. Like it's just an impressive amount of wall-to-wall graffiti. And at the time, this is, 10 years ago, it was still open, you can get into it, and like, it was a common place to get like senior portraits done for like the students who were like not into sports or something and needed something a little more dirtier and edgier for their photos. Like, perfect, you have a weird haircut, you emo, let's get you down to Graffiti Graveyard and do your senior photos. So this amazing advice this guy gave me is basically the location of where everyone gets their high school photos taken. That stuck with me because it's so not a secret, it's even pinned on Google Maps. Oh, my Lanta. Okay, story number 3. So this one goes back to May 2013. It was shortly after I had bought my big 24-inch photo printer and had gone through the first steps of taking photographs shot on my lovely 8x10 camera and printing them huge, 24 by 30 inches. A big, lush print. To give you an idea of like the quality of these prints, when you go and you have your old 35mm films shot back in the 90s, whenever, you throw it off at the drugstore and they send you back those 4x6 prints, those little 4x6 prints from the 35mm negative is a 4 times enlargement. So just get that little print, you have to enlarge the film 4 times. A 24 by 30 inch print off an 8x10 negative is an enlargement factor of 3. So this giant print requires less blowing up than your little family snapshots to make the tiny little picture back in the day were. And this results in just like I said, a really detailed, beautiful print. Like sometimes people print big for the sake of printing big, and it starts with like a 35mm negative and it ends up with this picture. While it's big, doesn't look good when you go and stick your nose into it. And that's how this like weird like minimum viewing distance bullshit came into existence, I believe. But like these, you can rub your nose right in that print and lick it, and all the details right there. It's great. So I had made some of my first big prints like this, and I was going to visit my family. So I rolled them up into a tube and brought them down with me to my hometown. We're sitting in a bar, and I'm like, "Hey mom, want to check out some work I'm looking at?" And like roll out these big beautiful prints on the bar. And like, "Oh, these look nice, blah 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 blah." And another person at the bar who I didn't know sees these, and he's like, "Oh," wanders over to go check them out as well. And he's like, "Wow, I've never seen prints that are this clear and beautiful." He's like, This is amazing. Like in his amazement, he's like, "Can you print something for me like this?" And I'm like, "Go on." And he's like, he's like, "I gotta show you this picture." And he pulls out his flip phone and shows me the picture on his screen. And the picture is of, and I shit you not, 2 dog turds he had found that when they fell out of the dog had landed into the shape of a crucifix. And he saw how wonderful my prints looked and was like, wanted a giant print that looked just as good as my prints of this dog shit crucifix sourced off a flip phone. Needless to say, I didn't print this photo for him, but again, in hindsight, I kind of wonder what just a flip phone picture of a dog shit crucifix would look like printed by 24 by 30 inches. Might have actually been amazing in a weird Sony Mavica way. So the first 3 stories were memorable because the people in them kind of gave me that, look, like, what the hell are you on? The fourth and final story I'm going to tell here, more lighthearted, and again, one that stuck just because of the confusion involved, is humorous. So this story takes place in July 2017. I had recently bought myself a Mamiya 6 medium format rangefinder, and it was one of the first times I'd taken it out to just shoot in public with it. And this particular day I met a friend to hang out at a Little League tournament to watch her kid play Little League, and I was like, okay, yeah, maybe some Little League will be a fun photo opportunity. So we're standing around, I'm like showing my friend this new camera, blah blah blah, and she's like, "How much was that?" And I let her know that the exact dollar amount being over $1,000, which I made a comment that at the time was the second most expensive camera I've ever purchased. Number 1 being But okay, so, you know, I'm showing her the camera, describing details, and eventually she jokingly drops the question, "Is that a Hasselblad?" Again, if you're not into photography, it's, for some reason, any camera doesn't look like your SLR camera. Like, this goes back for like decades. Strangers will just randomly ask you, "Oh, is that a Hasselblad?" Hasselblad being a brand of large, expensive cameras that are really popular, have taken many of the great historical photos in the history of the world. It's the camera they took to the moon, you know, so it's always a weird thing that no matter what you're holding, someone will eventually ask you, "Is that a Hasselblad?" She asked it intentionally as a joke, because I've explained this joke to her in the past, but at the point when she said, "Is that a Hasselblad?" this woman, this elderly woman standing, you know, within earshot of us, turns around and just goes, "I'm sorry, I have to see this." So I'm like, oh, she looks like my mom, but I guess my mom could know what a Hasselblad is and be a photographer and wanted to see it and hold an old Hasselblad. You know, you can't judge everyone by the way they look. So I'm like, okay, here you go, and present my camera to her. And she looks at it, like, disappointingly and goes, "Oh, I thought you were talking about a ring." Somehow this woman was eavesdropping me describing a Mamiya 6, and all the data going in was being parsed as, like, features of an engagement ring, and needless to say, she was sad she didn't get to see a nice, pretty ring. But another strange encounter with a wild human story that has stuck with me ever since. So there we go, that's story number 4. I'm gonna end the video here because I didn't really intend for this to be a marathon video. If you liked it, please go hit that like button because it helps my channel and it's free. And if you want to do something really awesome, pick your favorite video on my backlog and go share it on your social media, because that brings in new viewers, and that also helps his camera. And that also helps his channel grow. So till then, here's your video of the week or so.